I've probably said it more than 1,000 times in my life. A list is just a list in SharePoint, and once you learn to work with them, you know how to work with them all. I stand by that premise, but like everything in life, there are a few differences, even though a vast majority of the functionality is the same. If there wasn't, there wouldn't be different types of lists, right? In this chapter, we want to briefly work through how to use some of those special features. We're not going to rehash everything else, just the specific functionality differences. You can run with it from there once you understand what the slight differences are. So, we're going to talk about discussion boards, wikis, surveys, and blogs. The core functionality of lists will get you a long way, but some lists, either because of the type of content they hold or the way they need to function, have additional or slightly different methods. Discussions, as their name implies, allows you to follow the thread of a discussion. Wikis are like typing on a regular web page, but they also have special syntax you can use to designate things like links. Surveys don't look like lists, but they are. It's just the columns are questions, and the fields that you'd normally fill in are the responses that you'll provide. And blogs, of course, allow you to share information in an informal way, but they must be managed to be effective. Because these are all probably somewhat familiar, but may not be, we need to understand what they are, how they work, and how to use them in order to effectively utilize them in SharePoint. Okay, so first, why even use a discussion on SharePoint? The answer is actually very simple. Exchanges via email are private and will remain private, but they're also difficult between groups. And this is the way we've done conversations and discussions for probably the past 10 or 20 years. If I want to ask a question, I send out an email to one or more people, and hopefully they reply. But if they only reply back to me, then everybody else is left out of that answer. That's where the difficulty begins. Discussions in SharePoint can be viewed in real time as well as retroactively. So if a person joins a team after a project has begun, or if a supervisor wants to review how a decision was made, it'll all be there. Something we rarely think about until it's too late is that when we keep information in email, the email goes with the person, not the position. So if someone leaves the team, the project, the department, or even the company as a whole, their mailbox goes too. And if no one else has been given copies of relevant emails, all that information is gone. In some lines of business, documentation is also important. So being able to put that documentation, again, where multiple people can see it without having to ask, without having to have things forwarded on, is certainly an important thing. Another reason that SharePoint is so good is because when things are posted to SharePoint, the server date and timestamps everything. And that can't be changed by the average user. Unlike an email, you've probably noticed if you forward an email, you technically can change the text within the original email. That's not an issue in SharePoint, so there's a little more structure, a little more assuredness that what you're seeing is valid. These are all really good reasons to use discussions, but the main functionality of discussions is simply the ability to track the back and forth nature of posts and replies to those posts. Another type of alternative list in SharePoint is a wiki. It's actually a collection of web pages, and anyone who has permissions can add, edit, and delete content on those pages. This is important because not all information belongs in fields, and sometimes actual files like Word documents limit who can access the information. For example, maybe they just don't have that particular software to view it. Another thing to consider is that when someone posts a list item or even to a discussion board, what they say is in some ways isolated as its own entry. Sometimes more than one person has something to contribute, and wikis allow that to happen. If we ask what the ultimate network is, the answer is, without a doubt, the internet. If we ask what the ultimate example of the power of the wiki is, at the moment, it has to be Wikipedia. Most people have heard of Wikipedia. In case you didn't know it, the hosts of Wikipedia don't actually add any content. It's all added by users, and each article or topic isn't written by one person. It's started by one person, then anyone else can add to it. So if someone like me starts an article about wikis, I can add a lot of good information that I know. But believe it or not, even I'll admit, I don't know everything. No one does. And every person also has a different perspective or experience. So when we allow others to add to what another person starts, it only gets better and stronger. That power of multiplicity in wikis in SharePoint is unbelievably powerful. Now you can allow several people to provide their input about business, a product, a marketing concept, a topic, a policy, whatever it may be. Wiki actually comes from the Hawaiian word wiki, which is just kind of fun to say, but it actually means fast or quick. And it started because it was much faster and quicker to develop content when users could just add it to an existing document instead of having to go through all of the formal web publishing processes and old-fashioned document routing that we used to do with documents. I think you can see how that's an appropriate name, WikiWiki, now shortened to just wikis. So you get to add your insights and knowledge to topics being discussed in the workplace by using wikis in SharePoint. There's one possible drawback to wikis, and that is, because they are open to authoring by anybody who has permissions, if people don't act responsibly, they can kind of spoil them. So always be sure the content that you post is accurate, appropriate, and respectful, and it will always be all good with wikis. Since most of us know how to type at this point, and wiki pages are just pages like documents that we can type into, we don't need to learn anything about them, right? Well, not exactly, because the very last bullet point that we have here, our functionality focus, is called that wiki syntax. Wikis actually have a very special syntax for working with links. So what is this wiki syntax? Well, like all web pages, wikis use codes to denote a link. And what would web pages be without a link? Wiki links, however, are much simpler than typical HTML links. They use double square brackets to denote links. So when you're typing along and you want to link to something, you simply put whatever it is you want to link in double opening square brackets. Now, as you type the opening square brackets, SharePoint is going to be nice enough to display a drop-down list of web pages that are in that site. So you don't have to remember the exact name of a web page. All you have to do is select it from the list. After you've selected from the list, then simply type double closing square brackets. When the page is saved, that typing will be translated into a functional link. An example is what we see here. This page on Wiki Syntax offers great tips. When that is saved as part of a wiki page, the text Wiki Syntax will become a link going to a page in the SharePoint site called Wiki Syntax. So far, so good? Trust me, double square brackets is a whole lot easier than having to type HTML code for links. Now that's how you reference an existing page, but you can also reference things like list names. If necessary, all you have to do is type the double brackets. When that list is displayed that shows you page names, at the very bottom it will also give you opportunities to go to a list or a view. If you click list, it will add the word list after your opening square brackets, and then display a list of all of the lists that are in the SharePoint site. So what we can see here is if we want to create a link that says, if necessary, find the vendor you need in the contacts list, then we would type it this way. Contacts is the name of a list in our SharePoint site. When the page is saved, this becomes a link to the actual contact list. And as I said, you can also do this for specific views of lists. Here's something that's even more cool. If you're in the middle of editing a page, maybe somebody else has written the page, and you decide that you need to create another page, but you don't want to stop, go out, create the page, then come back into the current page and create the link. That's the way we've always had to do it. The destination for a link had to exist before you could link to it. Kind of makes sense. But in wikis, it's easier. To create a new wiki page that doesn't exist yet, all you have to do is the same thing we've been doing all along. Type the double square brackets, put the name of the new page that you want to create in the square brackets. That's going to create a link to nowhere when the wiki page is saved. The link, however, is going to appear with a black dotted underline. The first time somebody clicks on that link, and by the way, it can be today, tomorrow, or a year from now, and it also can be you or anyone else who uses the wiki page, they're going to be prompted with a new page dialog to create that new page. So this is really a great method to be able to create information on the fly, or maybe even to put something in where you're really saying, somebody else needs to create this page. This is information we need. I'm going to put the link into it, but then somebody else can create it later on. Now that we've learned a little bit about discussions in wikis, let's move on to blogs and surveys in part 2 of this topic.